Then I'll quickly state the last three. Medicare tax increases, so increased Medicare tax. Taxing employer-provided health benefits.
Ooh.
Earns. Are you saying boo or boo earns?
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Doogles, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
Alexander Hamilton.
Good song.
Yeah, do you ever? I do, is why I'm asking this. This is like a backwards leading question.
Mm-hmm.
Every now and again, do you ever just pop Hamilton on that Disney Plus and say this needs to happen in my life again?
Oh, you mean like the actual video content?
Yeah.
No, I've never seen the video. Sometimes I do listen to the album. I'm not sure if I should be embarrassed by that or not, but
Interesting.
good.
Interesting. Yeah, I watch it.
See, like I've
watch
only
it.
seen it live because I'm cultured over here.
Yeah, I've seen it live in multiple cities. And
Oh,
and I've watched it on Disney Plus umpteen times.
wow. Maybe
Yeah.
it sounds like you have a problem, Doogles. Is this a cry for help?
Well, if you said that going to go see it is cultured, then I'm cultured exponent.
Go ahead.
Cultured exponent. When you say exponent after something, do you know what that means?
All I know is like twice a year, someone comes to me and is like, "What's up with Doogles and all these? Why can't he form simple sentences?" Like, I know he's a smart guy, but then so
You know,
no, I
you know
don't.
why? Because he's cultured exponent. If you can't understand Doogles, then you're not cultured exponent. All right. Should we get into
Yeah,
this?
we should get into this. What makes you real cultured is if you're a business owner, man.
Oh, I
That's
love seeing this.
cultured.
I love seeing this. Give us a take.
Well, listen, so Planet Money did a cool little breakdown, and I bet all our listeners know about Planet Money, but if you don't, it's fun to hop in occasionally. It's NPR's podcast slash. Is it a formal show or does it just happen during Marketplace in the
No, I mean,
afternoons? Anyway,
it's a podcast and they have a newsletter.
yeah.
That's
So
all I
long
know about.
running NPR emphasis on all things like money and finance, investing. And they broke down this trend happening with new business applications. And so historically, from like 2005 to 2020, there's something like 200,000 to 250,000 new business applications being filed on average in the US. Right at the start of the pandemic, mid 2020, that jumps to almost 550,000 new business applications. And everyone watched it and kind of said, "Oh, this is interesting." Like people are bored, they're sitting around their house, they're sick of their current job, they're doing something different. The most fascinating thing in my eyes,
And sorry to jump in
yeah,
though. One reason that I believe that that's true too, I think it's stated in this piece, is that there's so many things can count as a business. Like if I
sure.
decide to just start selling books out of my bedroom, that's a business. If I go and start a hair care salon, that's a business. If I decide to use artificial intelligence to do stuff, that's a business. And so when during this time when things ramp up like that, it's hard to tell really what's happening.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you sell stuff on eBay, if you
Exactly.
reach a certain threshold, a small dollar amount, I don't even know what it is, you should register as a business and actually run it that way. So this is like, yeah, of course, everyone's sitting around doing a little something. Their side hustle actually becomes registered as a new business. The most interesting part is then over the next 4 years, because we're 4 years from that now, it's pretty much sustained. And there's a new plateau on this graph at like 450,000 business applications per year.
Yeah.
This is why Planet Money and others, the articles that were written about this 2 years ago used to be like, look at this really interesting blip in the graph. And now it's like, look at this really interesting sustained 4 year period. What does that mean
Yep.
for the American economy? And I think that's the fascinating piece because now it's not just a one time event. It's like maybe people are more entrepreneurial today, or maybe they desire to control their own time a little more.
I love this as a general trend. I also love the fact it touches on this in the piece, but doesn't go deep into it. But I love the fact that when you look at underrepresented businesses, they are also a material part, or
Yeah.
businesses from underrepresented populations are a material part of this. I love all that. What I do not know, because this is the thing, at least in my mind, the story I told myself, whether true or not, you could check me on it. The story I told myself is oftentimes when businesses are started, it's coming out of times when other jobs aren't available. And so let's
Yes.
just call it a recession in short. So the the increase in business starts kind of get us out of, I don't know if they're the cause, but I just mean they lead out of recession. And here, yes, 2020 was a recession, but it was short-lived. Like it wasn't a full-on recession. And so I don't know what it means when you have these businesses being started at a time when all the other stuff we've discussed is also happening. Debt is increasing so much. It seems like the consumer, like it seems like we are on potentially the pre-recession time. I don't know what it means when businesses are being started into that recession if it happens. Maybe it hasn't happened, so
Well,
I can't predict.
I mean, you're gonna get my standard rant about a complex adaptive system. This is why everything's so hard, because we look at all this other data, we've been looking at it for years, and go,
Mhm.
gosh, it seems like maybe a recession is coming. And then you miss the fact that on average, 200,000 businesses per year, in addition to the normal trend, are being started. And I'm quoting from the piece here. Planet Money says that's like fairy dust being sprinkled on the economy, lifting the society's standard of living. Typically, when this happens, and it happened last time it really happened in mass was the dot-com boom, it means productivity growth is on the
Mhm.
way, means wages increases are on the way. Like, this is a really positive sign for the US economy. It's one of the things historically that has made the US economy so strong is the fact that people are willing to take risk and start businesses like this. I'm pretty fired up about it. Like, I just love to see it. And I guess all I know, because you can't make any grandiose claims, is it's not a bad thing, you know? And it's probably a really, really good thing for a lot of people, because even if it's that side hustle example, right? There's people out there experimenting with if their side hustle can become their main thing. And if it becomes their main thing, it might take off into something that employs 100 people.
I hope so. I hope so. I hope I'm not even gonna say the opposite. I'm just gonna say I hope so. Hope everything you're saying is absolutely right. I love to see it. Love it.
Yeah,
All right. Can I dip in a fishbowl?
please.
You know how maybe it was about a year ago, maybe a couple years ago, we were talking about how Tim Ferriss in the book 4 Hour Work Week, he talks about you don't need to make your money back the way that you lost it. If
Yep.
you if you invest in stock X and stock X goes down 30%, you don't need to make that 30% back from stock X. You can make it back somewhere else or outside the stock market. It don't matter. So we were talking about that.
Wait, StockX. We're talking sneakers now.
Yeah, that was a bad term for me. So let's stick that. Keep that in your mentals for a second.
Okay.
There's this woman, Priscila Barbosa, who came from Brazil over to the United States of America to drive for Uber and Lyft. It turns out when she got to the airport, the person that she was going to meet did not come pick her up. It brought her to tears. And she declared, I'm going to make my money back from Uber and Lyft, but I'm going to do it in scammy fashion. That story that I just told you is not quite true. I skipped a lot of detail, but but it fits my point, so therefore I told it that way.
Okay.
I think this is a fascinating story from a number of different angles. The truth is there is a woman, Priscila Barbosa. She came from Brazil to the US, ran this scam empire for Uber Lyft. But the details that I skipped and kind of made that story up, the details that I skipped are really important to make the story interesting. You want to lay something out before I go in?
No, I think you better try and be honest to this. I'm not sure where you're going
What?
with it.
No, the reason I laid it out that way is because it did make me think about that point that he made, because I was like, she came to the country to drive for Uber and Lyft or make her money that way. And then she ended up making her money that way, just in a completely different fashion. And then she
Sure.
lost it all when she got caught. But here's actually what happened. So Priscilla Barbosa, she was in Brazil. I had her family in Brazil, and at the time, Brazil was in recession, still might be, but Brazil was in recession, and her family lost their business. What she was trying to do wasn't working out so well. She'd started this like healthy meal and delivery service there. because of the recession. That didn't work out. So she's trying to make her way in the world. And she, through her travels, had gotten to know somebody in the US. She pinged them up, and that person was like, you could make $250 a day driving for Uber and Lyft, and started sending her screenshots. Look
Well,
at
and
this. Look
I'm gonna jump in there because she's like 250 US a day is more than a doctor or a lawyer makes here.
Yes.
I got a hookup in the States. I'm gonna spend my last, I think her flights were, excuse me, $900. She's like, I got $1,000 in the bank. Just get me to the States where I can make this
No.
$250 a day.
Her flight was $900. She didn't have $1,000 in the bank. She had to sell her like grandfather's ring.
There we go.
To
Yeah,
get
that's
the
it.
$1,000. So this just shows the level of commitment to what she's about to do. So she lands in the US. The first part of what I said was true. She lands in the US. The person that she was texting with did not come pick her up. She was like, crap, I just got here to do this thing and I'm stranded at JFK. Tears, tears, tears. But she's a storyteller, this person, I tell you. So what she does at that point in time was she films like the New York skyline and all the hustle and bustle. She's like, I'm in New York, baby. Like, so while tears are streaming down her face because she's sad, she's telling the story of the beginning of her
classic
rise.
social media. Like I'm
Classic
crying in
social media.
real life, but my Instagram post looks all fab and famous.
Exactly. Yeah. Classic social media stuff. So then she's like, what the heck do I do here? And kind of getting back to the last point we were talking about, underrepresented groups starting businesses. Oftentimes when you have these underrepresented groups, especially immigrant groups, you will help a brother, a sister out, even if you don't know them from your own population. So she started hitting up people that were Brazilian immigrants in the US. And like, oh, this is my situation. Can you help me out? People would give her places to stay. People would give her in odd jobs, right? So she can make a little money, et cetera, et cetera. So she starts down this road. She ends up driving for Uber and Lyft. And how does she do it? Because she's on a tourist visa here, people. She's not a immigrant, not a resident. So how she ended up doing this? How she did it was someone said, we can rent you an account. Wait, what? We can rent you, Priscilla, an account. Here's what that looks like. Someone else has uploaded their driver's license. It's someone else's like social security number, all that, et cetera, et cetera. And she just gets in the car. So she gets in the car and she might be, I think there was one of her names was Shakira. Like she's hopping in the car and she's Shakira for the day or for whatever period of time it is. So she's not herself.
So then, and we'll try and I'm going to make you cut to the chase here, Doogles. So then she's doing that. She might be making $250 a day. She doesn't have a U.S. driver's license. She's obviously doesn't have a work permit here. But if she makes $250 a day, she might rent this identity for $20 a day, $50 a week, whatever the case may be. She quickly realizes in her group of immigrants, and by the way, for those of us that ride Uber and Lyft recently, this article's an enlightening read because I now think a lot of the drivers might be I thought that before, but I wasn't sure how the identification process worked. And now I think I fully understand the loopholes in the identification process and why a lot of people might be jumping on a plane to come drive Uber or Lyft around here. But anyway, she realizes that the easy money might be in those identities, basically licensing those identities over WhatsApp, finding a way to get pictures of people's driver's license, maybe photoshopping new face on that.
Let me back you up for a moment, and then I'll let you cut to the chase.
Sure.
The two things that came together that then led to what you're talking about are this. One, she discovers a hole in what she's claiming, the hole in the Social Security system, where if a Social Security number came after 2011, then it's like harder to be background checked. I couldn't exactly figure out why that was, but
the government so she would changed the process. Yeah.
So she would put random numbers in to see what was generated online, and then that's how she'd come up with some Social Security number. So that was one. So she came with the Social Security thing. The second, which I think is even more interesting, was there was a woman. She was driving her car, Uber Lyft, and one of her passengers left their wallet in the car.
Yes.
And she goes, I mean, what I'm picturing is like she's climbing the Himalayas. She's doing everything she can to get this wallet back. She's crawling in the sewers, talking to the Ninja Turtles to get this wallet back. And she takes a picture of the woman's license. So the woman's very rude to her. She expects that when she gets back, the woman's going to be like, "Oh, thank you, Priscilla. Priscilla, queen of the desert. Thank you
Well,
so much."
Shakira or whatever name she's
Yeah,
driving under
exactly.
at
She
that
probably didn't know her name
point.
was. She probably didn't know her name was Priscilla. But anyway, but instead of saying thank you, the woman was rude to her, and she said, "I'm gonna upload your picture with a social security number and create an account." And that
Okay.
is what clicked what you were
Yeah.
talking about.
Well,
Continue.
hold on. We're gonna take a brief detour. This is in Wired magazine. It's an interesting read, but they have like pictures of Priscilla, like I don't know, modeling or something.
Yeah,
What is going on
I
here?
don't know.
Like she's a criminal, effectively. Why did we write her up in all glamorous way? It's an interesting story, no doubt about it. It's not black and white. There's a lot of gray area in here, but that's weird. The second thing is, yeah, I hope it's not lost on the listeners at this point that Social Security identification for numbers that were created from 2011 on are harder to identify. And so that was one of the loopholes in the system. Well, Social Security numbers for those born in 2011 would obviously not be able to drive. So somehow Uber and Lyft's identification system here is claiming that you had to like, I mean, there's a massive loophole that you shouldn't really be able to use a social security number for someone that's created after 2011 unless you immigrate and like get a new social security number assigned, which would be a small percentage of the population and probably should have been verified manually or something. Like the one key point here that I want to make is Uber and Lyft, and I can hear Munger in the back of my head, like you you get the type of behavior you incentivize. They incentivize growth at all costs. They wanted new drivers to sign up. So they knew, wink, wink, that it was easy and there were loopholes in their new driver verification systems. And they've been sued across the world because of this. And they were letting it go because, especially Uber, but both of them wanted to create dominant market shares and take over markets. And that was key to how they make money.
It's exactly right. It's R.I.P. Angela Lansbury, tale as old as time. Exact same thing. Incentives drive all of this. And there's shared accountability that comes in this, which shared accountability sometimes leads to no accountability. We got Uber and Lyft trying to grow like wild, and then you have they use Checker as their background check system, and Checker was like, "We're all good," and so like, "Cool," right? So even to your wink, wink, even if they knew, which you'd have to imagine they did,
Oh,
they go,
they knew.
but we're using this foolproof system. So that's how all this happens. So she builds it. Now we can skip to the end here. Y'all can read it on the Substack on Monday, Wired. But she starts this huge empire. She's making $10,000 a month. Like, imagine this. The woman who had to sell her grandpa's ring to get that $900 flight is now making $10,000 a month. And as she said it, I didn't realize I was doing a crime. I just thought I was being an entrepreneur.
I mean, that's again, we get into a lot of gray area here. I don't know that I'll buy that one.
Have you ever seen a criminal sitting on a bar stool in their apartment with their legs crossed with the lean back?
It's my whole point here, man. Oh,
All right.
interesting read. Yeah,
Good.
check it out.
All right, what you got in the fishbowl?
I'm reaching in, and mostly I just want to get you fired up. I was reading this book this week. Actually, great book. Knocked my socks off. Was super surprised by it in a positive way. It's called Never Enough by Andrew Wilkerson. Do you know Andrew
Okay.
Wilkerson, Doogles?
I recognize the name, but why do I?
He started this mini, I mean, people call it the Canadian Berkshire, but they're stretching the truth when they do that. He started a couple businesses, actually several, and had great success, and then now has like a holding company that branches off of that, and became really big fans of Buffett and Munger, and actually had an opportunity. Like he has been fortunate enough to sit down with both those individuals, and the book touches on conversations with both of the individuals. And at one point, it was thought that his company would merge with the Daily Journal because Munger
Oh,
was trying to bring in some fresh talent. So that's where it all gets so interesting. But the thing Andrew does really well, and I've never read a book quite like this, is almost all the book focuses on how challenging it was for him to make a lot of money. And I know that sounds like woe is me, but like he went from making $650 an hour to at one point being considered a billionaire, and made all the stupid mistakes of buying the Porsche, thinking he wants to buy a yacht, buying the 3 houses, only have the 3 houses become like an absolute suck on his life and his relationships. Watching people get mad at him if he paid for dinner, and people get mad at him if he didn't pay for dinner. Like this emotional roller coaster, hedonic treadmill, mimetic desire, all this stuff. I think Andrew does an incredible job spelling out, and in like a very personal way. So if you're into that, check out the book. But this led me to think about wealth. I think we talk about wealth in the wrong way, right? In this book, he's always going like, I was so excited to be called a millionaire, and then I was excited to be called a centimillionaire, and then I was excited to be called a billionaire. And at the end of the day, these are just numbers that are completely meaningless, especially if you don't know how much money the person spends on an annual basis.
Say
You're shaking
more.
your head over there. You're
Say
shaking your head
more.
over. My point here is that as a society, we have so much backwards about money, but one thing we have especially backwards is being like, that person's a millionaire. It doesn't mean they're wealthy, not necessarily. I know you're going to correct me on this, and I'll appreciate the correction. It means you have more money than most, for sure.
Well, it's the same.
And if you're,
it's the same. I'm cutting you off. It's the same as we were just talking about Uber and Lyft. If you just looked at Uber and Lyft's revenue line, you could say they print in cash. Oh my goodness, these companies must be. And then you scroll down that P&L. Actually, there's no P. You scroll down that L. There you go. You see they're losing money.
I think Uber makes a profit these days.
Yeah, Uber's there now. Uber just made it. But historically,
this is kind of my point, right? Don't just talk about companies with the revenue line only, and that's what we do with people. We say, "Ooh, billionaire," and like 99.9% of the time, that billionaire means they have ownership of a company which isn't even liquid to them. And so I think there needs to be a normalized figure that says this person spends $60K a year, and they have a net worth of $600K a year, and they're not a millionaire, but they have 10 years worth of expenditures saved up, right?
Are you talking about FICO score?
No, I know you think this idea is stupid. And for the podcast, just so we have a term, for the podcast, I want to call this Skippies, right? I want to say that person is worth 10 Skippies. Stupid name, and it's an intentionally stupid name. My point is, there's millionaires and maybe billionaires out there that are only worth 3 Skippies or 2 Skippies or whatever, because they've let their expense side of the P&L just run in crazy, insane, right? Because they have the 5 houses and stuff. They're not truly wealthy. They're just a millionaire. Is there any merit to this line of thought?
I think for the sake of conversation, it is a valuable combo to have. Like it's a good one to have. I think this is hard for the everyday person, which I know is not that's not how you set it up, but the everyday person to even fathom getting to a Skippy.
Okay, we're going to dig into that. Actually, let's take a detour. Let's dig into that right now. This is where I think society is broken, and why we need to reset the narrative here. One, you're right. Most people don't think about, I want to get to 5 Skippies or 50 Skippies or whatever. They think, oh man, my retirement balance needs to be X. And for simplicity's sake, I got to get my retirement balance to $1 million. And this is where Morgan Housel does a brilliant job of talking about the expense side. And the quickest way to gain true wealth is to spend less money. If you're spending $100K a year and you can get that down to $60K a year, think of what you can do to your financial longevity. It's massive, right?
Yeah.
And so I think part of the reason that so many people struggle with retirement savings and everything else is there's these terms out there that seem completely unattainable. The average salary in America, I know you know this off the top of your head, is what?
58.
And people making 58 are they're hearing yahoos in financial media saying you need $2.2 million to have a comfortable retirement. And they're going, how do I ever get there? And I'm saying, you've got to change the way you talk about it and say you need $1 X Skippies. I mean, that all depends on but right.
Yeah, yeah.
For simplicity's sake, you need 10 Skippies. And then they're going, my goodness, I can get there. I only need, and you can get to 10 Skippies if you save 12% of your retirement for 25 years and control your spending. That math isn't exactly right because I made it up, but it's in the ballpark.
I get what you're saying. I do think that is a more valuable way for us to look at these folks. It's also so much less interesting and sexy.
So
I just want to see that people got bees. You know what I mean? I want to know how many bees you got.
The whole world does it, and not to make this too much about Andrew Wilkerson. It happens to everyone, but he had the stalkers break into his house, and the people try and pitch him a business idea on his back porch. And, you get all the yahoos that come out because the bee gets assigned, or anyone that sells a business for tens of millions to hundreds of millions of dollars has to deal with some yahoos, in part because society glamorizes this. Also, why did I read the book? Probably because the B word is thrown out, and it's like, oh, I want to figure out how this guy became a billionaire. But
I thought you meant barista.
Yeah, I like coffee. That's I really do. I need help with the narrative and how we actually talk about this, but I think a lot of people would be better off if we talked about this differently.
It's maybe the next iteration of when someone's trying, this gets to maybe your retirement point. When someone is trying to save for retirement, so you're not at the point really where you're talking about net worth. Mm-hmm. But when you're trying to save for retirement, it's how many months of expenses are you saving up? And then how do you then invest that, et cetera? But you're not talking about net worth. And then eventually, when it becomes about net worth, then it's how many years of expenses, right, do you have in your net worth? It's like the next iteration of that. And it's where all these, especially people that get rich quick, get into trouble, whether that's from the IPO of your company or the sale of your company, or because you became a rapper, or because you became some other type of celebrity. It's where they get into trouble because their Skippies are probably like 0.2.
This is what I think is incredibly valuable about this reframing. I'll use a made-up billionaire named Bob Smith. Actually, billions too much.
Robert Smith? Robert Smith is a very famous billionaire that just paid off a bunch of student loan debt from people.
Oh, gosh. I was just trying to pick a generic name. All right. Give me another generic name.
How about William Gates? Okay, go with that.
My point is, if this became the lexicon of how people talked about wealth, you could understand that generic millionaire over here is only worth 5 Skippies. And next door neighbor, like go to the Millionaire Next Door book, right? Next door neighbor over here is worth 75 Skippies, right? Because they spend nothing and they eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I'm not telling anyone to eat whatever you want for lunch. There are people that you run across in everyday life that are wealthier, absolutely, in my eyes, that are wealthier than some of the world's richest people. And we just don't talk about it that way because we only talk about the revenue line, and it's completely broken and it's pretty stupid.
I do think that the analogy to companies that we discussed before is an important one for folks to keep in mind when you're thinking about this concept, because we do it all the time. People that are investors do it all the time with companies. The maybe non-investors don't. You might just see the top line of NVIDIA or Apple. You see the trillions, but investors, we look at what's the ratio. What's the ratio of your value to your sales, your value to your profit, your value to your cash flow? It's a very similar concept. And the reason that we do it with companies is because it matters. Because it tells us, it's a quick heuristic. It doesn't matter equivalently to all companies, but it's a quick heuristic to get a sense of how underwater or not a company might be, what their future prospects might be, how fragile they might be.
And of course we do, because a company like Costco sells all the goods in the world and maybe gets to keep 1% to 2% of all that money that flows through their doors, because they spend the rest on buying the goods. And a company like Visa gets to keep like 56% of all the money that flows through their doors. It's what
different.
Actually matters is what you get to keep.
Yeah.
What is left over at the end of the day. To your point about the average American, maybe, and this is where I promise to move on soon. Yeah, there's some people out there that would have a negative Skippy rating, I guess, because they'd have negative wealth. But that's okay, because then for them, you wouldn't have to say, your first step wouldn't be like, you have to be a millionaire. Be like, let's turn this ratio positive. That's step one. Then let's try and get to one.
Yep.
Then we'll reassess from there.
All right. I think the thought experiment and the conversation is very important for folks. I'm a fishbowl it right now. I'm gonna stay on the train of debt though, and talk about the U.S. debt, the U.S. national debt. Typically, when I send you something from Yahoo Finance, you give me an okay boomer. This
Yeah,
time you
typically
didn't.
I don't read it.
Yeah, no. But this one, I think this is a good little piece. Yahoo Finance. Sorry, Skippy, we go to Yahoo Finance, but it's in Yahoo Finance. It's called "Here's Who Will Pay to Fix the Nation's Mushrooming Debt" by Rick Newman.
Wait, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm gonna have to calculate how many Skippies the U.S. government is worth.
No
Don't you
Skippies. No Skippies. No Skippies.
All right.
We've discussed the amount that the US has been spending. We discussed that here on the podcast. And there's a point that this piece comes down to, is that like when either Trump or Biden, like when we're talking about the key issues now, neither really are touching on where debt is. It's mentioned, the spending is mentioned, but it's in a place where I would say we need some kind of focus on it. We got to figure out something here. And I'm going to give you a couple numbers to tell you what I mean. So one, I'll give you the number that doesn't mean anything by itself, but it's still alarming. We're at about $35 trillion in debt. 35 trillion. Let me put that into some historicals for you. Hey, we'll do it as a little quiz because quizzes are fun. In 2001, where do you think we were?
3 trillion.
More than that, but you're directionally close. 5.8 trillion.
Okay.
So we are over 6x where we were 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Massive.
Now, I said the absolute number maybe doesn't matter as much. We were just talking about ratios. We are now at a point where we are over 100% of GDP in debt. We're like about 115% is what I saw there. And this number has been increasing, especially over the last few years. So you've got, let me pull this up. Hold up. There's an ad in my way.
So if you just look at finance.
Yeah, there you go. So we hit 100% in 2019. So we increased up to 100% in 2019, and now we're at about 115%. In 2020, COVID, we went from 100% of GDP to 126% of GDP and have come down a little bit, but we're still over 100%. And so COVID's a part of this, so it is an important point. But like during that last debate, Trump was talking about how Biden's been spending so much. Biden and Trump have spent about the same amount,
mm-hmm.
but COVID, it overlapped in the beginning of that, so it's a little bit difficult to really show those side by side. But regardless, we got to 100%, we got to 126%, and now we're at 150%. So it's an issue. That's just the backdrop to say this is an issue. This piece, though,
the real government spending nerds, if you can call them that, will effectively tell you that every country historically that's consistently spent over 100% of GDP has eventually landed in ruin. And so that's why that figure gets talked about the way it does. And in the simplest sense, it all makes sense. If you don't spend within your means, eventually your currency is devalued into a place where it's meaningless. And we all know that what happens after that.
Exactly right. It's along the same lines. That's why you're talking about the Skippies. So I'll give you one little stat from this that I found to be interesting, and then I'll talk through some of the tactics that came up in this as to some ideas of what we could do to decrease the debt. Here's the stat. The ratio of workers to retirement beneficiaries has dropped from 5.1 in 1960 to around 2.9 today and heading to 2.5. What that means, so ratio of workers to retirement beneficiaries. What that means is back in 1960, there were 5 people working and contributing to Social Security. Let's keep it simple. To Social Security.
Yeah. 5
people working for every person that's getting Social Security benefits. 5 people putting in the money, 1 person getting the money. Today, that's 2.9 people putting in the money to one person getting the money. All these ratios, very important. That one, conceptually, I mean, we talked about the fact that we have an aging population. We've talked about all that stuff, but just looking at that number, it's pretty mind blowing. All right. First up, raising taxes on the wealthy. That's come up over and over and over and over again. Various ways to do it, but raising taxes on the wealthy was the first one. You sent me something this week about the IRS finally doing what you talked about, like a year or so ago.
Yeah.
And this isn't even raising taxes. It's just like getting the taxes that were already as they are, just collecting the taxes.
Yeah, not surprisingly, the IRS did what they said they were going to do and put more emphasis on effectively billionaires and got more money because of it. There we go. Good work.
Yeah, collect your taxes. The second category is adjusting Social Security and Medicare. So one is, let's go back to the beneficiary ratio. If you got ratios like that, how about when folks are taking that money out, that we adjust the amount that you can take out based on where you sit in the income train? So this is saying for the bottom 40% of incomes, keep it as is, and then have little cuts for the top 60%. It's another one.
Yeah, I mean, none of this is, as we talk through it, it's not that we are agreeing or supporting any of these things necessarily. I think with Medicare, especially, you can be smarter about how the money actually gets spent. You can like get more value per dollar spent because you are the dominant medical payer in the world, pretty much. And you get very little value for those payments because somehow we've decided that we'll let the healthcare companies effectively like set the prices here. It's bizarre. I think it's a very inefficient part of the government where everyone goes wink wink, and then we look at those inflation charts and you look at like hospital services outpacing every other cost of good over the last 40 years and go, what's happening here? Well, Medicare certainly plays a role in that. There's no way they could not, because they're paying such a large percentage of those bills.
So let me throw this one out. Raising the payroll tax ceiling. So many folks may not know about this, but once you hit a certain income, it's $168,000 of income. When you start getting paychecks after that, Social Security is no longer taken out of that. So what this is saying was just like tax all incomes for Social Security.
I don't like that one, but whatever. Glad you like it. Good for you.
No. Okay. Then I'll quickly state the last three. Medicare tax increases, so increased Medicare tax. Taxing employer-provided health benefits.
Ooh.
Earns. Are you saying boo or boo earns? And then capping or reducing defense and discretionary spending. That one seems so different than the others, but like I get it. Spend less on stuff like that. That makes sense. So the bottom line, as we started this conversation with, is there's likely something that we got to figure out with regard to getting our debt ratio correct. Or, as Skippy said, eventually it comes back to roost. It comes back to bite you in the tuk-tuk, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, to be super clear about that, another way to have more money is to pay less money servicing debt, which you would do if you had less debt.
You're saying lower interest rates?
No, I'm saying don't have 35 trillion in debt and your total debt service bill reduces.
That's a classic way. Yeah. It's hard to pay down debt that you don't have.
No, it's hard to pay interest on debt that you don't have. That's what I mean.
All right. We'll put that one on the Substack too, so y'all can take a look and read through it. It's an important topic that we are not talking enough about. And we even in the last, what was that, starting last August or September, we started hitting the debt ceiling. Remember, like our government is at a point, it's stopping us from operating.
Well, so the debt ceiling conversation is really fun because people are representatives seem to go to Washington and write a bunch of checks. And then when it comes time to pay those checks, they go, no, you're not allowed to pay those checks. There's a debt ceiling in place. Yeah. But maybe we need to switch the entire system around where like you can't write the check in the first place, because once we sign the new law that requires us to spend more money.
Yes. Exactly. It's silly dilly. It's all silly dilly. You got something else in the fishbowl?
I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you, everybody, for listening. SkippyDoogles.com for everything. SkippyDoogles@gmail.com. That's where you can get our listener mail, thoughts, questions, comments. Send us articles. We'll talk about them. And
Oh, and
talk to you next
tell
week.
us how much you love the Skippy's concept, and
Ooh. Oh my goodness, Skippy.
we'll take over the world together.
Thanks, everybody.
Peace, guys.